Hello, it's Mrs. Gillum, and I'm here to read a book to you today. The book I have chosen is The Lazy Giant. Now, before we get started, there's something I would like to do first. This is something that good readers do before they start a book. It's called preview. So before I start reading, I like to look at the cover of the book and the back of the book. Gives me an idea what the book might be about, what the problems might be, who the characters are, and the setting. So I'm looking at the cover of the book, and I see there is a giant, and he's surrounded by lots of different children. So I'm thinking, do I know any other books that might have a giant in them? Well, I thought of Gulliver's Travels. But what about Jack and the Beanstalk? And then I thought, well, what are these children doing? Some are combing his hair, they're trimming his beard, brushing his teeth. So they're taking care of the giant. What do you think? Do they look happy doing this work? It's kind of hard to tell. And then next, I'm going to look at the back. And on the back, there's a little short summary there I'm going to read. Working all day for the lazy giant is no fun. If only the children in his castle could get their own back. What are they trying to get back? Well, maybe they're trying to get their own house back. I wonder how that's going to happen. Well, doing this work as a reader before I start helps me get warmed up and ready to read the book. Are you warmed up and ready to read the book? All right. Now, in this book, I notice we're going to come up with some new words that we're going to come across, and I want to take care of that before we read the book. The first word is cottage, and a cottage is a small house. The next word is porridge. Porridge is like oatmeal. It's a warm breakfast. The next word is bristles, like on a brush. A hairbrush has bristles. Your toothbrush has bristles. Cleaning brushes have bristles. So they're the stiff, hairy things on a brush. The next word is motion, which means to move, moving around. Wobble is when something is not steady. It hasn't fallen over yet, but it's wobbling. The next word is creaked. That's a noise. Sometimes a door can creak, or the floor can creak, or the steps can make a creak sound when you step on them. And the last word on my list is tumble. So when something falls down, it tumbles. It goes all the way down, like Jenga blocks. The Lazy Giant by Ivan Jones, illustrated by D. Schulman. And here's the table of contents, and it shows there are 5 chapters. And they're very short. We're going to start with chapter 1. The Giant. Once there was a horrible old giant. He lived in a big castle on top of a mountain, and he was very lazy. The giant was so lazy, he needed servants to look after him. But nobody wanted to work for him at all. One day, the giant went down the mountain. At the bottom was a little cottage. 12 children lived there, all on their own. The girls were called Lottie, Dottie, and Toddy. And Bessie Jessie, and Nessie. And the boys were called Cliff, Riff, and Sniff. And Ken, Ben, and Den. Now they would make good servants, thought the giant. So he carried them off back to his castle. Chapter 2. Is my breakfast ready? Every morning, the children had to get up very early, light the big stove, and fetch lots of water. Then they had to make a huge pot of porridge for the giant. And there's the porridge I told you about. At 6 o'clock, the giant would yell, "Is my breakfast ready?" But one morning, the children woke up a bit late. The stove wouldn't light and the water wouldn't flow, so the giant's porridge was lumpy. "You lazy lot," roared the giant. All the children started to shake. The castle itself began to quake. The giant was so angry, he picked up Toddy and dropped her into his bowl of porridge. Now Toddy was the smallest child of all. She was only as tall as the giant's boot. Her little yellow hat fell off and bobbed on top of the porridge. "Yuck, yuck, yuck," cried Toddy. "I may be teeny, but I do not scream, not even for a giant so mean." As soon as the giant's back was turned, Lottie and Dottie pulled Toddy out. Without her hat, she looked smaller than ever. Chapter 3. Is my castle clean? Every afternoon, the children had to polish and rub and sweep and scrub, and everything had to shine like a new pin. At 2 o'clock, the giant would yell, "Is my castle clean?" But one afternoon, the polish ran out. The head fell off the broom, and the bristles fell out of the great scrubbing brush. And the giant found some cobwebs in a corner. "You dirty dopes," boomed the giant. All the children started to shake. The castle itself began to quake. The giant was so angry that he picked up Nessie and dropped her into the waste paper basket. Now Nessie was the untidiest of all the children. She always left things on the floor and forgot to comb her hair. "Ugh!" she cried. "I'm in a stew. There's rubbish all over me. What can I do?" Just as soon as the giant's back was turned, Bessie and Jessie pulled Nessie out. Poor Nessie, she looked untidier than ever. Every night, the children had to warm the giant's bed with a big hot water bottle, and the sheets had to be clean and smooth. At 10 o'clock, the giant would growl, "Is my bed ready?" But one night, the hot water bottle had a hole in it. Water ran onto the bed, and the giant found the sheets were cold and damp. "You dozy dips," roared the giant. All of the children started to shake. The castle itself began to quake. The giant was so angry. He picked up Sniff and dropped him in the wash basin. It was huge. Now Sniff always had a cold, but he never moaned. He was always cheerful. "Help!" he cried. "This basin's like an ocean. It has a very choppy motion. The water's rough and dirty brown. Get me out before I drown." As soon as the giant's back was turned, Riff and Cliff fished out Sniff. After his swim in the giant's basin, Sniff sniffed worse than ever. Chapter 4, Hurry Up. Every Sunday, the children had to get the giant's carriage ready. They had to pull it up and down the mountain. He would lie on soft cushions inside it. At 11 o'clock, the giant would roar, "Where is my carriage?" But one Sunday, it rained and rained. The lane was muddy and the wheels were wobbly, and so the giant wasn't going as fast as he liked. He roared, "Hurry up, you little rats!" All the children started to shake. The carriage itself began to quake. The giant was so angry that he reached out of the window and gave Den a push. Now Den was the strongest of all the children. He rolled and rolled until he was out of sight. When the other children saw what the giant had done, they were very upset. But they pulled the carriage to the top of the mountain. Then Lottie whispered to Dottie and Toddy, and Toddy whispered to Bessie, and Bessie whispered to Jessie and Nessie. Nessie whispered to Cliff. Cliff whispered to Riff and Sniff, and Sniff whispered to Ben and Ken. They all nodded. The children gave the carriage a huge push. The carriage raced down the hill. It creaked and rattled, and it banged and it clattered. The giant bounced out of the carriage. He rolled down the mountain until boing, boing, splosh. He fell into a muddy hole. The giant was very angry. "You nincompoops," he roared, "get me out!" But the children were safely out of the giant's reach. And then Ken and Ben heard a voice. "Help," it said. "Ben I was, and Den I am. I thought I'd never see you again. But thanks to the tree on the side of the hill, your strongest friend is with you still." Den was hanging on a tree branch. As quickly as they could, the children rescued him. They were only just in time. "Get me out of here!" The giant was bellowing and banging, yelling and thumping. He made so much noise, the rocks on the mountain began to tumble. Before the giant could say, "You blockheads!" a big rock rolled down the mountain and conked him on the head. He was knocked out cold. Quick as a wink, the children ran down the mountainside, laughing and shouting. They were so happy to go back home again. As for the giant, he got himself out of the hole and crawled back to his castle. He never tried to catch the children again. And so, if he ever wanted anything done, he had to do it himself. Well, that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. There's a lot of fun things inside this book, and I will be sharing some of those things with you in the lessons to come. Thanks for being here today. Bye.
Kindergarten is great at Kansas City Public Schools.
I know they have really good teachers. I know this is a great school.
They teach them stuff that I thought my kids would never be able to know at the age of 5.
Since deciding to send our kiddos to a neighborhood school, we've become even more of a part of our community.
Now is the time to enroll your future kindergartner for the new school year. Visit enrollkc.org today.
I love Southeast because of the culture, the band program, and restorative justice.
I love Southeast because of the academics, sports, and students.
I love Southeast because of the people, the energy, and the advanced classes.
It's not alike. I love Southeast because the students here at Southeast are full of potential and they believe in achieving anything.
We are Southeast.
Southeast.
We stand shoulder to shoulder.
Join the Southeast family. Enroll today.
Hi, it's Mrs. Gillum. I'm here to read one of my favorite stories to my grandchildren and my students and children everywhere. The name of the story is The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. What makes this story so special is the message and lesson that Shel Silverstein is trying to teach his listeners and readers. Shall we start? The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. As I read along, why don't you listen for the message and lessons that this story is teaching you? Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come, and he would gather her leaves and make them into crowns and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk and swing from her branches and eat apples. And they would play hide and go seek. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very, much. And the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older, and the tree was often alone. Then one day, the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and eat apples and play in my shade and be happy." "I am too old and big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples. Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money and you will be happy." And so the boy climbed up the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day, the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy. And she said, "Come, boy, climb my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." "I am too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife, and I want children, so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house. But you may cut off my branches and build a house. Then you will be happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time. And when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered, "come and play." "I am too old and sad to play," said the boy. "I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "Then you can sail away and be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And the tree was happy, but not really. After a long time, the boy came back again. "I am sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone." "My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I am too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot climb." "I am too tired to climb," said the boy. "I'm sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I am just an old stump. I am sorry." "I don't need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I am very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could, Well, an old stump is for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down. Sit down and rest. And the boy did. And the tree was happy. When you think about this story, you can think about it from two different viewpoints. You could look at the viewpoint of the tree and learn a lesson. You could look at the viewpoint of the boy and learn a different lesson. What did this book teach you as you were listening? What lesson did you learn? Well, thank you for sharing a read aloud with me today. It's good to see you again. Until next time, bye.
I chose manual because it's challenging and fun, and it can help me with college.
I chose manual because I wanted to get a jump start in my career with culinary arts.
I chose manual to acquire skills I'd use in real life.
I chose manual because I want to be an ER doctor, and being an EMT is my first step.
Kickstart your future today at Manual Career and Technical Center. Manual is open for all 11th and 12th grade students in both Kansas and Missouri. Learn more today at enrollkc.org/manual or call 816-418-52.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
Paul Turner, Social Studies Coordinator. We're here to talk to you guys today about the Civil Rights Movement from 1946 to 1963. Basically, we want to talk about the politics that went into it and the economic benefit. First, we want to talk about the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment states, "No state shall abridge privileges of citizens of the United States, nor deny within its jurisdiction equal protection of the law." That's the 14th Amendment. That provides everyone the same rights and the same civil rights within the state. Within the nation, Civil rights. Let's define this. Basically, civil rights protect individual freedoms, ensure ability to participate in civil, political life without discrimination. So, prior to 1946, we were living in the era of Jim Crow. And after this era, basically, African Americans in the South were living a discriminatory life. They couldn't vote because they had a grandfather clause. They couldn't vote because they had a poll tax. So many African Americans during this time frame were actually working as sharecroppers. So they were denied because of these black codes, Jim Crow laws by the southern states and organizations such as the KKK. 1896, we had Plessy versus Ferguson. Basically established a constitution of public segregation of separate but equal. This basically followed all the way through the 1950s with our education system. You had two education systems. You had one black schools and you had one white schools. This basically was energized throughout the whole 20th century. Blacks were energized in the 1890s to vote. Remember, during this time frame after Reconstruction, African Americans were building their own communities. Places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Wilmington, North Carolina, they were thriving, but only to be torn down by the white populace. Let's talk about another definition called grandfather clause. I mentioned this earlier. Basically exempted black people from the literacy test if their grandfathers voted in 1860, excuse me. But 1860, we're going to talk about that, African Americans were still enslaved in the South. So guess what? It wasn't many African Americans in the American South that could vote. Early 1900s, only 20% of eligible African Americans were voting. Basically, they were intimidated against, discriminated against with the poll tax. In the early 1900s, the Jim Crow laws basically started creeping through the American South. This continued the South's legacy of complete segregation. This era basically marked an era of complete segregation of African Americans and white folks. By the 1940s, we started seeing some changes happening. A. Philip Randolph, leader of the Brotherhood sleeper car importers, planned a march on Washington. But FDR issued an executive order banning discrimination in the workplace. So this basically helped create a more level field. By World War II, African American soldiers started wanting more rights as they started coming back. By 1948, Truman desegregated the military. This helped launch the civil rights movement and basically wins in the court system. 1947, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball. Few Americans cared about civil rights, but this helped inspire change. So now we're moving into the 1950s. Things are changing in America. A quote from Truman, "More and more we are learning how closely our democracy is under observation. We must correct remaining imperfections in our practice of democracy." 1950, Sweet versus Painter in the Supreme Court ruled that separate professional schools of blacks are not equal. Basically, the University of Texas has 16 full-time professors and 3 part-time professors. All right, while the black school only had 5 full-time professors. They had more students. They had more volumes of libraries. So it was an unequal education. Okay, 1953 was huge. You had Chief Justice Earl Warren coming into the Supreme Court. He shocked many conservative court watchers by basically ruling in favor of blacks. You had Brown versus Board of Education. Basic rule separate but equal was illegal. Then you start seeing that ruling affected the American South. President Eisenhower, he was reluctant to enforce his policies. But by 1957, the Southern governors forced his hand. 1957, Orville Faubus, he mobilized the National Guard to prevent non-black students from enrolling in Little Rock Central High School. Elizabeth Eckert, one of the Little Rock Nine, stated, "They were moved closer and closer. Some started yelling at us. They tried to see our friendly face somewhere in the crowd. Someone maybe could help. I looked at the face of an old woman. It seemed like a kind face, but I looked at her again. She spat on me." So, you had rulings from the Supreme Court forcing separate but equal to be basically done away with. But you have these Southern governors still forcing a segregated way of life. So, they forced the president's hand. President Eisenhower, he sent troops to escort the Little Rock Nine into school. Basically, now he's using federal power to take over these states and let them know that separate but equal is all but gone. Now we have you have the evolution of today's school system. So, what was happening on the outside world? With the separate but equal gone, you saw many of these southern states. All these in red right here. They had to enforce this policy basically desegregation of schools. Out here and up here, there are desegregated schools. They had an optional in places like Kansas, New Mexico, Arizona, and in Wyoming. This is optional for them. So here's pictures of Little Rock 9 getting escorted by federal troops. So what else was happening in the world? Down in Montgomery, Alabama, you had Rosa Parks. We all know the story of Rosa Parks. Supposedly she was tired, she didn't want to get up and move her seat. So with the Montgomery boycotts, basically, they lasted for about a year, and it almost basically tanked the Montgomery busing system, because African Americans refused to ride the bus. This was a coordinated attempt, basically with African Americans. They were basically, they arranged rides to places to work, they arranged pickups from places to work, to make sure that this boycott basically was felt with the system. The Montgomery busing system almost failed, and they desegregated. And understand that Martin Luther King was only about 26 when this happened. So again, last time we talked about basically how young people were the voices of the civil rights movement. This was the truth. And any basically change in America, young people basically were the voices of it. This had to happen. The American Revolution, guess what? Those guys were in their early 20s. So this had to happen. The civil rights movement, these people were in their basically teens to 20s. Start with the education system, the boycotts. You talk about SNCC in the 1960s. You talk about the Freedom Riders. These guys are all young. An old guy like me, guess what? I'm old and set in my ways. But I can get energized from young people. So Martin Luther King, he created a Southern Leadership Conference, mobilizing black churches in the South on behalf of black rights. Civil rights leaders basically tried to make the suffering known to the public. Anytime there was a camera, they made sure that it was being filmed. Much like today, when you guys see those cameras out, this was going on with the civil rights era. 1957, Congress had to step in. Again, we're going to talk about the economic and how government action happened. 1957, Congress created the Civil Rights Commission. It investigates rights, violations, and protected whose rights are being denied. So now is he moving forward? So now we're going to talk about the sit-ins in the 1960s. 4 black college students basically launched a sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina, Woolsworth County. They were denied service. They kept coming back. They were spit on. They poured liquids on them, but they kept coming back. This became a national scene. Places like Oklahoma, you start seeing sit-ins at downtown Oklahoma City, at some of those department stores. Because, again, it takes young people to push the movement forward. We talk about today, what kind of events can you relate to this movement that we have today in society? Think about that question. Students demand service, white-only lunch counters. This sparked the sit-in movement. More people started joining them. More news cameras started showing up. So this became basically a regular occurrence on the news. April 1960. You start seeing the creation of basically the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, which we just lost John Lewis. He was one of the founders of this. He gives focus and force to the civil rights movement. Again, it takes young people to create change in American society. April 1960, Southern black students of SNCC started giving focus to this movement again. President JFK, he's a new president during this time frame. He seemed slow and unwilling to make these reforms. He was consumed by like the Bay of Pigs. He was consumed with these big issues in the world. Vietnam is about to start off. He was consumed with these foreign affairs. It took issues that could be put on the news on a nightly basis, and basically seeing kids being arrested for him to get involved. 1960, the summer of 1960, Freedom Riders rode the bus through the South, protesting segregation with white and black riders. They faced violent mobs throughout the South. JFK encouraged SNCC and voter education project to be registered voters to create this new voting bloc for basically the Democratic Party. James Meredith, he tried to enroll at the University of Mississippi. White students stopped him. He was mobbed. When Meredith arrived at the university to register for classes, September 20, 1962, he found an entrance blocked. Rioting erupted. Attorney General Robert Kennedy sent 500 U.S. Marshals to the scene. Additionally, President JFK sent military troops from Mississippi Guard and officials from the U.S. Border Patrol to keep peace. October 1st, 1962, Meredith became the first black student to enroll at the University of Mississippi. So we're going forward. Again, Dr. King is launching these peaceful protests. Spring of 1963. 1963 is a huge year in the civil rights movement. He launched a basically peaceful campaign versus discrimination in Birmingham, Alabama. The news started seeing these images of dogs attacking African Americans in the South, water hoses. They started seeing kids get arrested. This became just basically trauma to the American society. But yet, African Americans were facing this on an everyday period. This is nothing new for us. Now the world is just seeing what's going on in basically society. Martin Luther King was arrested. In the Birmingham jail, he stated in his Birmingham letter, "I'm in Birmingham because injustice is here. I cannot sit idly in Atlanta, not be concerned about what's going on in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. What affects one directly affects indirectly. I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. One who obeys unjust laws must do so openly, lovingly, and willingly accept the penalty. An individual who breaks the law in conscience, tells him it's unjust, and willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse conscience of the community over its injustice, its reality, and expressing the respect of law." Martin Luther King, the Birmingham jail letter. By the summer of 1963, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom happened. This is where he gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. I'm going to read parts of it to you. "I have a dream that one day a nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where we will not be judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood in Washington, D.C. But again, 1963 again was a huge year. A month after giving that speech, a bomb goes off in Birmingham, Alabama, kills 4 little girls. I will say their names. Addie Mae Collins, she was 14. Carol Dennis McNair, she was 11. Carol Roseanne Robertson, she was 14. Cynthia Dion Wesley, she was 14. They all died in this. Again, the civil rights had to happen. These things basically were not being played out in the national news until it happened. So when they started getting played out in the national news, people basically had to start paying attention. People basically had to start paying for the discrimination that basically they were putting on other people. Again, the civil rights movement was mostly successful. It was an American movement of blacks and whites working together for its reforms. All right, the peak of the civil rights movement happened in 1964 and 1965. Leaders of the basically civil rights leaders, Democratic president, and Congress cooperated and achieved long-standing reforms that had to happen. LBJ, he became the president after Kennedy was assassinated. He passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, banning racial discrimination in private facilities open to the public. Here's a quote. He understood the political ramifications of this. He understood that in the South, the Democratic Party probably wouldn't be welcome for a while. which is still probably true to this day, but we started to see pockets of it returning. His quote, "We have lost the South for the next generation." I'm going to throw a few stats out there to you. 1 million Southern blacks voted in the 1952 federal election. By 1964, it doubled to 40%. By 1968, 3 million voted. That's increased 60% of eligible blacks voting as the same numbers of whites. So they didn't take their chance for granted. They had an opportunity to basically change society. 1965, the Voting Rights Act was attacked discrimination at the polls. So no longer did you have to pass a literacy test. So when you turn 18, when you have the chance to vote, don't take it for granted. Go out and register to vote. That's part of your rights as an American. I thank you guys for listening to me. My name is Paul Turner, Social Studies Coordinator at Kansas City Public Schools. Talk to you guys later.
I chose manual because it's challenging and fun, and it can help me with college.
I chose manual because I wanted to get a jump start in my career with culinary arts.
I chose manual to acquire skills I'd use in real life.
I chose manual because I want to be an ER doctor, and being an EMT is my first step.
Kickstart your future today at Manual Career and Technical Center. Manual is open for all 11th and 12th grade students in both Kansas and Missouri. Learn more today at enrollkc.org/manual or call 816-418-5200.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists, and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
Okay, I'm here today, guys, talk to you guys about a current event. Today, I'm talking to you about the current event of Russia, basically the approval of a vaccine for COVID-19. A lot of U.S. scientists basically disagree, think that's basically just smoke and mirrors. So, the author of this article is John Cohen. Basically, a science COVID reporting. Let me go back to it. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay. The author of this story is John Cohen. It's stating basically that Russia, they came up with this vaccine for the COVID-19 virus. They think that they can sell it to the world and basically everybody can benefit from it. You already have the Mexican president, Manuel Lopez, basically said on Monday he will volunteer some of his citizens to take this Russian vaccine to see if it's effective. But the scientific world is still saying, you know what? We still don't believe that this is actually happening. Moscow's decision to approve this vaccine produced here first batches of less than 2 months of human testing and raised concerns that some scientists consider only 10% of clinical trials are successful. Some scientists have their fear basically that Russia may be basically putting prestige before safety. All the tests of this vaccine haven't went through yet. So they want to see basically a true clinical trial of this vaccine. This has become a global race to come up with the first vaccine and seeing who's going to do it. Why is this important? Well, the reason I feel like this story is important is because right now our lives are affected because of COVID-19. This is real. This is happening every day. And we have these companies putting billions of dollars into coming up with this vaccine. So for rushing out to go through the whole process to make sure that the vaccine actually works, there's a sense of skepticism going on with this. So I don't blame American scientists for not basically agreeing with the findings of this Russian vaccine. So why does this affect me? Because one, as an educator, I definitely want to be part of this vaccine, make sure that we can get kids back into school, and make sure that it's safe for everybody, for kids to even play football. So this is why this is important for me as an educator. So as we go through this whole process of current events, I want you guys to look at a story that you guys find. See if it's real, how it relates to your personal life. See how it relates to your everyday life. And see that you can take some causes and effects, basically why it's important and why is it not important to your life. This is Paul Turner, Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator. Thank you.
Kindergarten is great at Kansas City Public Schools.
I know they have really good teachers. I know this is a great school.
They teach them stuff that I thought my kids would never be able to know at the age of 5.
Since deciding to send our kiddos to a neighborhood school, we've become even more of a part of our community.
Now is the time to enroll your future kindergartner for the new school year. Visit enrollkc.org today.
I love Southeast because of the culture, the band program, and restorative justice.
I love Southeast because of the academics, sports, and students.
I love Southeast because of the people, the energy, and the advanced classes.
It's not alike. I love Southeast because the students here at Southeast are full of potential and they believe in achieving anything.
We are Southeast.
Southeast.
We stand shoulder to shoulder.
Join the Southeast family. Enroll today.
I chose manual because it's challenging and fun and it can help me with college.
I chose manual because I wanted to get a jump start in my career with culinary arts.
I chose manual to acquire skills I'd use in real life.
I chose manual because I want to be an ER doctor and be an EMT is my first step.
Kickstart your future today at Manual Career and Technical Center. Manual is open for all 11th and 12th grade students in both Kansas and Missouri. Learn more today at enrollkc.org/manual or call 816-418-52.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists, and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.